Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new edition of the Chris Arash Show. And we do have an excellent topic here to discuss artificial intelligence. But let's get started here. How are you doing, Chris?
Doing great. How are you?
Doing well. Good.
And
Um,
I was just going to mention, it was funny because I just had a conversation earlier today about driverless cars.
oh, that fits in perfectly. And that's
Yeah.
actually one of my questions. That's awesome. Let's get started here on artificial intelligence. First, how do you feel about it before we go deep into the topic? What's your general feeling about it?
I think for me, I sort of have sort of two layers of reaction, which is on a day-to-day basis, I think it's pretty cool. Like I think it's actually like, I kind of welcome it to a certain extent. And I think, you know, I want to see what it can do. I think there's a lot of positives. But then, there's a very sinister side to it. And it's sort of all the big kind of tech people and people who know better than us, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Stephen Hawking, have all issued, these tremendous warnings, saying AI will eat us all. Like this is, we have to be so careful now. And it's kind of like, oh yeah, it's kind of we are in a kind of a Black Mirror episode probably when it comes to AI. How about you? How do you feel about it?
I feel curious about it. I'm see it generally in a positive way, but I can see also how it could be misguided and used for nefarious purposes, for evil. But I think that's everything pretty much. I talked about social media yesterday about how you can use it for good or evil. And I think nuclear power is a great example of that too, that we can use it for different purposes.
But I think that what's different for me though, like you said, it could be used for nefarious purposes, suggesting that the problem would be other humans, right? Like
That's
sort of
right.
but what I think Bill Gates and Stephen Hawking and Elon Musk are warning are not so much, like what if bad people get it, but rather what happens when the machines take over. Like an us, like a Matrix kind of situation where, basically AI becomes super intelligent and you may know the word singularity. That's the
Mhm.
that the moment when, I mean, it's not necessarily that they become conscious or something, but a point at which AI becomes independent of us.
Yeah.
And I think that, so there's that kind of sort of X quality about AI. It's not just like, oh, it can do this so much faster. Oh, it can do this under, duress. Like we could send a robot dog to the Arctic and so that no actual dogs or humans would have to be there. But actually, when you have these sort of hyper, let's say intelligent machines, they actually start doing things differently, sort of according to their own mandate.
Well, this would be the Frankenstein complex that we have, and the fear, and it can go both ways. I mean, it can be somebody who is or something that is better than us, and which it is, but it's also it could turn against us. So I think what's probably important is here basically an element of trust, a leap of faith that we have to take, but also to make sure that we can safeguard it as much as we can. So the ethics of the person who's doing the programming, the algorithm. And however, I am aware that there are glitches, so things could go wrong. And so what do you think of Asimov's three laws of robotics, of the idea of maybe having something like that in the core system?
Oh, that
Where
they can do no harm to humans.
yes, they should do no harm to humans. They should obey us humans. And they should try to preserve their own existence. I think those are the 3 points. But we can still see how that could go wrong.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I was reading about is that something that AI algorithms are very good at is exploiting glitches. So because they'll be given some purpose, right?
Mhm.
And then they will do their very best to carry out that purpose. And if it means kind of taking advantage of something that's a little off in other parts of the coding, they'll 100% do. So I have an example of this, which I found really
Mhm.
interesting. So there's an algorithm that was supposed to figure out how to apply a minimum amount of force to an airplane landing on an aircraft carrier, right? So it's sort of being controlled by the AI, and like
Mhm.
how much should you sort of push it down to land on the aircraft carrier kind of safely, right?
Mhm.
But it discovered, just trial and error, that if it applied, in the words of this text, of a huge force, like if it just like totally just slammed it down, that would cause an overflow in the program's memory. And so the huge force would actually register as a very small force because the memory had been overwhelmed.
Mhm.
And so it is like, oh, well, if ultimately all I'm trying to do is for it to register as a small force, I just got to smash this plane down. And I've been a very good robot today because I did what I was asked to do. Because it's not like thinking about, oh, yeah, there's like a little human that's getting crunched in it. Um, and what was the other one? Um, yeah, like and game playing algorithms will find all sorts of ways that will be ways to win that have not that are kind of on the not the exact rules of the game, but just sort of the edges of things. So it's
Mhm.
like again that sort of sense that it's so smart, it's outsmarting us in ways
Yeah.
that are ultimately potentially very you know hazardous to our existence.
I think that's the fear, though. I mean, we are afraid that they are better than us, but they are. I mean, in terms of errors, we are much more error prone than them. So in
Yeah,
comparison, we have to keep that in mind. And so there's like I think the difference between narrow and broad AI. And so the narrow ones were when we started with the chess playing. And at first we were hopeful because we did like even when we had a pretty strong machine that they're playing against, our best player would sometimes win. But now it's gotten to a point where it's don't even try. You have
yeah,
no
yeah,
chance at all. And so I think part of our fear is that because they are better than humans. They are more intelligent than humans because of again what we've created. So it's that Frankenstein complex where we created a monster that's more powerful, more intelligent than we are, and maybe a sense of envy as well.
yeah. And to go with that, I learned an interesting term. We know AI, but then there's also AGI. And
Ooh, okay.
AGI is artificial general intelligence,
Hmm.
and meaning that it's, like what you described. I mean, even to play chess, obviously that's a fairly complex algorithm, but it is a sort of you're just playing chess. Like you can't do other stuff.
Mhm,
But
yeah.
even, in order for a driverless car to operate, there's must be just thousands of algorithms and a lot of very different skills being used. And so when you kind of have that general package, it's a little bit more like us, right? Like we have like a general package of sort of cognitive abilities and sort of routines that we do that are applicable across a variety of different tasks, and so allow us to kind of double up on things and problem solve. And so one of the things that the Turing test.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was sort of already getting there. 30 minutes just for everyone. If you can chat for 30 minutes and have the person, you know, who's the human who's having the conversation would not be able to tell the difference between whether that was a computer or whether that was a person. But then there was some additional, I thought, very interesting tests that people suggested, and that's simply the coffee test. And
Hmm.
that's like, can you make a cup of, like, can you go into the kitchen and figure out, the coffee machine, what the buttons do, find the coffee in the cabinet, And all, is that something, because that would sort of be, again, a general sort of skill. So it's like, again, at this point, I know, but I mean, if they can drive down like a street in San Diego, when they could probably navigate our kitchens, right?
I've read a book on that. David Barter wrote about the main purpose was to show like how much effort it takes, how many mechanisms are involved to create coffee, and
Oh,
it's
okay.
quite interesting. And I was stunned, like how much we take for granted, but all the processing that goes into it, and the memory, and remembering where things are, and remembering to buy the coffee in the first place, and the sequences, and then this disruptions we get with phone calls, and still be able to continue doing what we were doing in the first place. So it's quite complicated. But just to go to driverless, and the Turing test as well, I think that's quite fascinating. Um, do you think it's necessary for the Turing test that robots would blend in a way like Blade Runner, where you can't distinguish them from others? Do you think that is a necessity for them to pass the Turing test, which is what some people are suggesting, that they should not only converse with us, but also look like us and act like us and kind of blend in?
Mm. Well, I think it's an interesting start, because I think we do have. I think the Turing test has been. We are there, and the reason I say that is I remember hearing about a piece of AI that can book your hair appointment, and as I recall, I could be wrong with this, but as I recall, it was two computers talking to each other. One of them taking the appointment at the hair salon, and one of them booking on behalf of a client. And so it was like, hello, Debbie's hair salon.
Mhm.
Yes, hi. I'd just like to, book something for Debbie, or for Louise or whatever. And then it would be like, well, I got something on Tuesday. Oh, sorry, Tuesday's no good. Wednesday? Oh, like they were able to handle all of that. And it was two computers talking to each other. And it was like, there weren't really any mistakes. It was very much like a human conversation.
Mhm.
I'm sure there would be ways to easily throw them off, but for that, it was sort of like, whoa, that was pretty close.
And we have Sophia, I think, who looks very much human, and so it is that idea of them basically replacing us. So it becomes like harder to distinguish. Am I dealing with a human, or am I dealing with a robot? We're still not there, but I think we are pretty close from videos that I've seen.
Yeah, and I mean, but when you start talking about, you know, when sort of Blade Runner style, they might either look like, or like, the movie Her,
I was thinking of that too.
where at
Yeah.
least, certainly sounds like, very, very much so, and sort of syntactically really persuasive. Um, you kind of, what was interesting to me is like, you get like the uncanny valley effect, sort of comes into play. But it was sort of in Her, you didn't really have that, the uncanny valley, like,
Mm.
that sort of
Mhm.
feeling, that sinister feeling of like,
Mhm.
so much like us, but obviously not, and it causes us some anxiety, like a Blade Runner robot that looks
Mhm.
very sinister, because so us and so not, but so cold and kind of heartless, or whatever however you want to conceive of it. But I wonder if that'll even be the case, because it'll be so seamless and so flawless that we'll just simply, you know, they'll just blend. And then I guess the question, remember Data from Star Trek?
Mhm. Yeah.
I feel like there was so many interesting questions raised about sort of what humans need, and a kind of almost like a solipsism about the relationships that people had with Data. Like, it was sort of, yeah, he's a robot, and it just doesn't matter. Like, it's just, he fits into my world. Like, he's just, like, that people would have emotional relationships with Data, and he would respond in kind, and it was satisfying and meaningful to the human. But obviously, kind of, for an outsider, it's like you're having a meaningful relationship with something that isn't actually conscious.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
yet sort of does the job. Like, just kind of, it just sort of raised that question of what is it that, how far will that go? Will we have, I mean, there's also, obviously, there's all sorts of, I mean, Japan's a big one on this, sort of AI pets
Mhm. Yeah.
for the lonely, the elderly. Not even, I was going to say the lonely and the elderly, but I remember seeing a show where it was like childless couples,
Mhm.
and they would have some creature, dog, whatever, that wasn't real, but they were so, they just would dote on it, and if it at all broke down, and if there's any parts that needed to be replaced, they were just, it was like taking the dog to the vet.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, what's something fascinating that I read about is that in places like Japan, they are so advanced in AI because they are thinking of one of the reasons is to make sure that they can provide healthcare to the senior population that's growing, and they don't have enough humans to do so. So once they have the technology, it can take away the positions of humans, and they can provide at least similar care as a pet. I mean, I know it's quite different, but also to respond to the needs of the person and interact with them. One of the cool things is you would be able to program them. And I'm thinking of a scene in Interstellar where he is basically deciding what percentage of humor, sense of humor, should it have. And so you can be quite in control. And one of the things that's quite fascinating with certain of the games that they're doing, like say poker, you need to bluff. And so that
Mm,
is, I don't know if we can call it consciousness, but at least a certain amount of awareness of the situation to be able to say something that is opposite to what you've been programmed to do. And so it's quite complex, but I think it's not consciousness. I wouldn't say it is, but I think it comes close to a sense of awareness. And the question would be also, would you be willing to date AI like her? Because it sounded quite fascinating in her. I was like, maybe.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, that's sort of, that's, I kind of, when I think about that scenario, I imagine it being one of those, like, it starts off as a kind of a lark, and it's just something that, yeah, whatever, it's fun. And then, there, I think it's going to start like making you insane. Like,
Yeah, I
basically,
can see
because
that.
I think
Yeah.
what happens, you come home and it's like, hey honey, how was your day? And you're just kind of playing at the, in your mind it's still just a kind of weird fun thing you're doing. Yeah, blah blah blah. uh, Kind of tired, and then you start feeling that dependence on it, and then you're out with a bunch of people who have, like, sentient human relationships, and you go, what the hell happened to me? I am in a very deep relationship, with well, what's the Amazon one, what's the
Alexa, or
yeah, yeah, like, I'm in a relationship with Alexa, like, what
so
happened
am
to
I.
what's that?
So am I, will the other person
Yeah,
say.
exactly. Wait a minute, you
Like in
can't all
her,
be.
yeah.
And then, does it also mean that you're not open to having relationships with humans anymore?
Yeah.
Because
But
humans
but
are going to be kind of a drag after somebody who's so like always there for you.
Well, but the thing is that programming, I think that's not a good thing. There should be an element of surprise, you know? So like you go in and there's like a percentage, like just act in a different way, not something that, because then it becomes boring. And the interesting part, the spice of life in relationships, which we talked about last time, is also that unpredictable element where you things could go in a different direction because we're humans. And so I think we need that element of surprise when we do the programming, but to add kind of certain like spice to it, I think.
Yeah, so just like you say, hey, how are you? You respond back to it, how are you doing? Fine. What's
Exactly.
wrong? Nothing.
Exactly.
No, I'm just sort of picking up on something. Why don't you just leave me alone? Okay, like, why don't you always with the questions? And they were just sort of like, and then we'd like have a, like, regular kind of human relationship. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's I'm sure that people will build, I mean, in low key ways, I think Alexa style assistants will become much more part of our life.
Oh yeah.
And I think it'll be natural for humans to treat them with a kind of a whimsical affection. I mean, we already do it now to a certain
Yeah,
extent.
exactly. We already do that now. I mean, even like our relationship with objects now, whether it's a car, many people, or ships way back, they would say she and her, and so the cars as well, and then our phones today nowadays, because we have such an attachment to it. So the emotional attachment to devices already exists, to technology already exists. It would be taking a step further, and I think that is already happening, as you are saying.
Yeah, for sure.
What about driverless cars? Would you get into one? Would you buy one? Would you be interested in it?
I'm all for it for sure.
Good, me too.
Not a fan of driving, not a fan of
Same here.
other drivers. I think human error. I'm always surprised that there isn't more carnage on the road. Like just because people drive texting, drunk, tired, insane,
Or just road rage. It's
road
terrifying. I've
rage.
seen it in friends.
And,
Yeah.
and even given that there may be a few fatalities along the way with AI too, overall, I think I would rather trust a machine than a person.
And we're so tough on AI. I mean, there's like one accident, and we go, "Oh my God, there was an accident." But humans do like lots of accidents, and
Yeah.
we get off the hook. So we have to be careful of that too, and look in terms of data and statistics.
Yeah. And I mean, and they're just going to get better, right? Like
Mhm.
one of the interesting things that was mentioned in that conversation I had earlier today was an AI vehicle is talking to every other AI vehicle in the
Mhm.
vicinity.
Mhm.
So, for example, if it's like, oh, there's traffic congestion downtown, on a certain street, then they can agree amongst themselves that some of them will go a different way. Like immediately, like these are split second kind of rerouting decisions that will totally make everything much easier. Or there's an accident, or there's one cut. Being able to anticipate in 5 kilometers, I'm about to, potentially encounter another vehicle instead of waiting visually for that other vehicle to come into view.
Yeah, I watched a video where they actually stop for pigeons. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
that,
yes. I think
yeah,
I think that's the same one that I
yeah,
saw.
yeah. And so I was fascinated by that. I mean, it's better than most humans who wouldn't stop,
Yeah,
whether
right.
intentionally or unintentionally, not stopping for the pigeon. So I think that's quite promising.
Yeah,
And it's funny
absolutely.
because you can't actually take control. If you do, it will just like, just stop the car and just pull over. It's like, okay, no humans are allowed. They were suspicious of humans taking control. Like,
Huh.
we are running the show here.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, that's and I mean, it's just it'll probably be a private ownership is probably, I don't know if that would even be in our lifetime, like it's probably would be prohibitively expensive. But I can imagine it becoming like a fleet of Uber style vehicles that would just, come to your door just like an Uber, but there's no one there. And then, you know, off it goes. And then one of the comments that I was talking person I was talking to was like, and then maybe to some sort of disinfection station or something, sort of in between riders, because you wouldn't really, I don't know. I just thought, yeah, that would make a lot of sense. And would be nice to see more long range, use of them, because not just like sort of within the city, but hey, I want to go. I mean, it's sort of like a taxi cab too, but then you just,
Mhm.
because you don't have a human driver in there, it might actually be easier. Like for example, oh, I want to go to Salt Spring Island, or something like that, and
Mhm.
it's like,
Mhm.
okay, and then it takes you all the way there, and then it just kind of they just leave it somewhere in a lot, and it's like there isn't a person that has to be like housed or whatever. You know what I mean? Like there could just be a more wide use of it, so that'd be kind of neat. What about sort of economy?
I was
I
going to
read.
ask you that exactly.
Okay.
That was exactly my question.
I'm
Like,
just looking at a
I'll let him
statistic.
finish and then I'll ask him about the economy. So, okay,
Okay.
I'll take the question. All right. I think like basically we are being treated like robots in a lot of our jobs. Like just the idea of the assembly line is something that you're treating humans with their capacity, their intelligence to do repetitive actions that a machine would do as well and would do better than we do. So I think I don't see it as a threat for most jobs, because we do need that human touch. But for certain jobs, including trucking business, they say AI could take over because the streets are relatively clear. They're not. We won't find jaywalking pedestrians as much. You won't find that many pigeons. It's quite possible to do so. Radiology, imaging, all these kind of things, AI would be better at. So why not, allow this to happen and then focus instead on jobs where the human touch is necessary, like such as daycares. You won't send your child to daycare with a robot in charge, right?
That's right.
So or teaching, which is again something that we can relate to. And yes, it can do lots of things in terms of vocab, maybe translating devices, but the human touch is needed as well as with medical in medical professions and so on. Yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yep. I wonder though. I am a would be. I'm a little worried about how it may be how it may be abused in an educational setting.
Mhm.
Like I feel like what is, expedient, convenient, on demand could potentially take take over from the human. Like, I think.
But aren't some teachers like that?
Yeah.
It's like sometimes I feel, where is the human side of this? And so you're kind of automatically going through things, steps, you ignore the students' needs and desires and so on. So maybe the robot would be more compassionate in that way, in certain
Yeah.
cases, of course.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I know that I remember one of the things we were looking at, as you know, I work for a language testing company. And one of the things that we were always looking at is, ways in which somebody could, for preparing for the test, could record a response as for the speaking test, and then receive automated AI feedback on
Hmm.
that, like
Hmm.
without any teacher or whatever. And
Yeah.
couldn't we potentially, if there was such a thing, could we ever incorporate it in our preparation products? And at first, there was a few things that were more like about tone and pronunciation. Like even karaoke machines can do this, right? Like where you sing and then they can measure how good you were in terms of pitch and all of that, and you get a score like where you were.
You can become a professional karaoke singer. Cool.
Yeah, exactly. And so then it just became over the years sort of like they're expensive, but there is something that exists like that will give you feedback on speaking, tell you sort of what you did right and wrong. And then even the AI that we see in terms of assessment, like where it can actually take a piece of written or typed text and give you a score on how well this is an expression of academic English
Mhm, mhm.
for someone preparing for university, and no human is actually involved. And it's like, wow, how, and it's sort of kind of parsing clauses and looking at the grammar and all of that, which seemed, I think, to me like would have, if you would have told me that like even 10 years ago, I would have said, well, there's no way that requires a level of subtlety that only human mind, who's well versed in all things, grammatical and all of that could do. Well, turns out it's actually not too bad at it.
Well, yeah, and so there are mental health apps that are actually quite successful, and one that fascinated me was one that you can check up and you can say things, and the AI would basically kind of take note of your eyes, your face, your facial expression, your voice, and can decide again your mood and whether you need some extra help or
Mm,
some counseling and so on. And I found that fascinating. I mean, there is a creepy element to it, but if it's done well, if it's done ethically and so on, I think it's fascinating.
yeah, yeah. And there was a similar, I forget what it was, that they can also detect physical diseases
Hmm.
by
Hmm.
like scanning your eyes and things
Yes.
like that. And then it knows that you have some, liver deficiency or something like that. It just picks up on things that as humans we can't. So all of that is, I think sounds really good, and it means that it could be available to potentially more people at a lower cost.
Mhm.
So I think that's positive. And I love the idea that it wouldn't, one day the machines do all the work, like that we just become a leisure species and just pursue meaning and purpose, for ourselves rather than survival.
Yeah, become more skilled. I mean, then we don't have to worry about that. And that's what technology is all about, to give us that freedom, that time that we need so we can do other stuff. But there's also distance surgery. I don't know if you've seen that, where the surgeon is far away and they can, through computers and AI and so on, they can do the surgery, and it's been quite successful so far from what
Oh,
I've
yeah.
heard.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I was just now, of course, sort of on the way there. What is it going to mean, globally for actual humans, job wise? I have this statistic here.
Oh, cool.
According to a recent World Economy Forum report, robots, automation, and artificial intelligence could replace 85 million jobs globally by 2025. However, it will also create 97 million new jobs.
Oh, it creates more than we lose, right?
Yeah,
So
but
that's
but
good.
it's not like you mentioned the example of the truck drivers, and I
Mhm.
forget who mentioned that. Was it Elon Musk or someone who, like, AI could put a lot of truck drivers out of work, like because of that. And it's like, if your expertise has been, driving a truck and understanding, the sort of supply chain that goes, with it, whatever. It's not like Monday you got laid off and then Tuesday you're coding, you know.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Oh.
there has to be some, if the rate of change is very rapid,
Mhm.
then it could potentially lead to a very destabilizing effect in terms of labor markets, where certain skill sets just are sort of
Mhm.
kind of overnight,
Mhm.
you know, out of the picture. It's like, oh, we don't need that anymore. You 10 million, whatever it is, truck drivers or whatever else it is, and it's like something has to be done there to there has to be a net, some sort of safety net, and not just kind of yay AI, and too bad about that you're suddenly unemployable because nobody thought about this. Like, I think,
I think it's gradual, but we also see it in supermarkets where you do the paying yourself, so the cashier becomes obsolete. And it's not something that happens right overnight. It takes some time, but I found that that's a brilliant move in terms of, like, capitalism. It's like, let them do the work, let the customer do the work, and we save resources and employees for that, and they can do other stuff instead.
yeah. And did you immediately feel that way about that?
No, actually, just the other day, I was like, and because it's when it's starting, you just kind of think, okay, this is new. Maybe you're a bit excited. Maybe you feel proud. I can do this on my own. And then, but after a while, when you think about it, you step back, you say, oh, this is pretty smart. I'm doing the work for them.
Yeah, right. I don't know. I felt initially kind of resentful. Like, I was kind of like, God damn it. It's like, you know, and I found that there was a lot of glitches. Like, I found, like, if I didn't have if I didn't want their bags, like if I had my own bags, for example, sometimes
Mhm.
it wouldn't let me
Yeah,
go. So I would have to get an attendant. So I would
yeah,
be like, well, that kind of defeats the purpose,
yeah.
like, I have to get somebody. There was just like some little thing like that, or sometimes having to select the price code for some
Mhm.
particular piece of
Mhm.
fruit or vegetable
Mhm.
really was beginning to feel like the job of a cashier. Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
seriously, like, what should I, like, go and wrap it up for you and put it in the store and
And
unload
then
the truck for
we
you
had
as
some
well?
cashiers who didn't know it and didn't do it well, and we thought, I can do it better, and I'm not working at your store.
Yeah, but I guess, I mean, I understand. Yeah, I mean, it obviously, it's going to be a cost cutting measure and ultimately maybe even result in
Mhm.
lower prices for us. But I did feel like, you know losing the human touch with the cashier was sort of something that I missed in terms of, like, the shopping experience, and just sort of, I imagine, from a marketing or a kind of a sales point of view. It's like, you know you there's something about having human interaction at your
Mhm.
IGA
Mhm.
that I would imagine sort of bonds you to your IGA to some extent. I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but I just felt like there was something to be said about having that human interaction, and probably was good for business. You know, where you'd be like, oh, I like going down. Yes, I could go to Save on Foods, but it's so impersonal. I like going to IGA, and I say hi to Maggie and whatever it is. But it's like, I don't know. Maybe it's not that important, but it just felt like something that was missing in that
Mhm. But it
previous
also
year.
feels automatic. The only thing I didn't like, it just like, they say the same things and phrases to the same people. So it's basically like a robot doing it. So for me, that human interaction was kind of did not feel that great in some ways,
Mm,
because the machine could do the same thing. It feels
yeah,
like it sometimes.
I guess, but they're not. I guess even though it wasn't like we're having deep conversations,
Uh-huh.
but there was that acknowledgement of the other person's being, person.
Yes,
You know what
yes.
I mean? And
Mhm,
so it could be the most kind of um, banal. Oh, look at the
mhm,
weather, whatever
mhm,
it is.
mhm.
But
Yeah.
there was some connection there of like, hey, I'm here every second day. You know me, I know you, and just to have that moment of human connection seemed
And,
like
and especially nowadays, because I feel like I'm lacking it. I mean, it is wonderful to do things virtually, but then kind of that kind of just bit of touch where they pass on something and you grab it. It's just like you can't do that on a screen. So it's just like minor things, like you say. I think it's quite important. Let me see what questions I had. I think we actually answered them. We answered them. Is AI taking away our jobs? I think we did that. Would you trust AI more or a human specialist if you had, for example, like in certain situations, like medical professions?
I,
Um,
I
if you
think I
had a
would like to.
choice.
I think I would like to. I could potentially see a situation where there's an interaction between both.
Mm.
Like
Mhm,
where I would be fine with like an initial diagnosis being carried out by some sort of AI,
mhm,
but I would want to have the human kind of um, in interpreting that, providing me with some, additional information, being able to answer my questions, being able to anticipate the possibility that it's a little more complicated than it seems. So yeah, I mean, it seems like it's still, that's somewhere we still, I think we need the human touch.
mhm, mhm. And kind of explain things on our level, kind of the teacher student interaction, where you ask a question and you don't want to get the same response as everybody else. You want a personalized, individualized, tailored to you, specifically to you, and that is the human touch, I think, that we need. What about the fear of drones and the military using AI? I think that is my biggest fear,
Hmm.
because they can be used with robots that kill others. But then I also look at soldiers, certain soldiers, and I'm thinking it's kind of pretty much the same, no, in some cases again, because you're drilled into that kind of mindset. But the capacity of like a drone deciding whether to shoot somebody or not, and so on, I find that very scary.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, like Obama's drone
Mhm,
attacks, were
mhm,
took out a lot of civilians, took out a lot of people who just collateral damage,
mhm,
and so yeah, I think that's a scary one. The precision, or sometimes obviously there's both. The precision is kind of scary in terms of how from the other side of the world somebody can order a killing, but also the way that it can be imprecise and take out innocent lives as well. Like that's a really scary thing. Um, and yeah, and I mean, obviously, we're seeing right now what Putin is doing in Russia, and it's just a matter of like somebody with no moral restraint at all. Somebody who would just there would be nothing holding him back from what he wants to achieve. He's going to use everything. So with more sophisticated technology, maybe will be a matter of the most psychopathic person wins because everyone else would be afraid to make maximum use out of it. At least with nuclear weapons, there was that sort of mutually assured destruction component. but if you could have first strike capability with technology that is so effective that there is no opportunity for retaliation, it's like, whoa, that's scary.
Well, my hope is to basically have robots on both sides and have it battle out, and whoever got the strongest robots would win, and to kind of eliminate the humans out of the equation. I think
Yeah,
that
that'd be
is my
great.
hope. So the strongest programmers would win. I think there is actually a program where you create a machine and they fight against each other, and then one group wins.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think that would be
like a high
ideal. And then
like I think it was like high school AI clubs that
yeah,
build
exactly.
a
Yeah,
really
yeah.
good battle robot, and then they'll do like the grand battle royale, and
Mhm.
then whoever wins wins, and then yeah, no human lives have to be involved. We just have like a robot cage match, and then it's like
Mhm. Yes,
okay, and
exactly,
everybody agrees that that's
exactly.
just the way it is. But it probably wouldn't stop there.
Yeah,
But I have another question here that
sure.
I came across, which was, online. I think there has been attempts to do this. Could AI identify and potentially remove bias, within social media? And the sort of the I immediately thought of something I remember hearing about years ago, where they created a bot for Twitter, which was just going to be like sort of a free form bot that was going to emulate the information flowing around it and kind of
Mhm.
gradually build its own kind of identity. And within a matter of a few days, it became this like right wing hate bot, like just spewing the most horrific, uh, you know, discriminatory things, like just because that's so much of what's there, and how much it's, I don't know, sort of it's kind of sticky in terms of attention,
Mhm.
and it was sort of funny and sort of tragic, but it had to be diffused fairly quickly. But I wonder if how how AI is being used. With Facebook always having this really terrible track record in terms of managing hate speech, managing, sort of, they do have, all kinds of AI that sort of seems to get things wrong a lot, where it's suddenly like, oh, the one thing is considered some kind of hate speech, but it clearly, or sort of, but it's not,
Mhm.
it's,
Mhm.
and then something else that clearly is gets through, so
Well, I'm hoping that can be fixed. Maybe this is because they're still learning and so on, and that's something that could be fixed later on. But at the same time, I mean, it's hard for humans sometimes to distinguish that too, and you have to think carefully. Well, was this meant as in this way or this way? Was this sarcastic? Was this ironic? Was this like just trying to make a point in it? And so it's a tough decision. I think it's a tough call even for humans. So in a way, I understand how that could be difficult, but then there's the blatant stuff that I don't understand. Like both the bot and the human should see that, and this is how they tracked with certain like keywords, and they track terrorism and so on, because yes, it can be done. So I'm kind of also wondering if it's just a lack of motivation and willingness from those companies to address that. I think we should have the know-how currently.
I also think, when we say can identify bias, it's like whose bias, like
Exactly. Well, that's the other
bias
question.
is a very subjective matter, and it's
Mhm,
sort of like, obviously, if it's Fox News, they're going to have a very different idea of what constitutes
mhm,
bias,
mhm.
compared to someone who's more left wing. So
Yeah,
I
and
don't know.
even like terms like discrimination. I mean, I would tell students I discriminate on a daily basis between them because there are those who do better and those who do worse. They give you grades. That's a form of discrimination, but it's based on the work, based on what they bring in, not based on things like sexual orientation or racial differences. And so it's not based on that. So we do discriminate all the time among each other and friends, and who's your friend and who's not your friend. That's, you're differentiating between people. So it's something to keep in mind too. We do have a comment actually. Just noticed that AI can go both ways by Ty. Thank you, Ty, for the comment. AI can go both ways, but it will seemingly replace portions of the labor workforce, and that's when we're talking about that.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true. But again, the hope is that we will get more skilled and we'll have more skilled work there. But certain things, even if it involves skills, certain things like travel agents, I think AI would be really good at that, of finding the best deals, most likely better than humans.
And then also just to go back to that point of like, and then, hopefully we move towards also just less work needing to be done,
Mhm,
so
mhm,
that it's just because, and people, so maybe people who may lose their jobs may not have to work as much anymore, like because we've got all these like robots doing stuff for us. And so, we start getting into a place where we, have all these robot servants, doing all our stuff for us. Have you ever seen those, like in an Amazon warehouse where they have
Yeah,
the stacking robots,
yeah,
it's surreal how quickly and how, how what's the word for it? Like they're able to do such precise, tiny little movements to kind of maximize the use of space, and
mhm,
pick up a box and it zips over here and it goes over here. And it's like, it would take days and days for humans to do that,
mhm,
and so,
mhm.
suddenly something like that can be done very quickly. So presumably there's going to be more profits because you're paying, you don't have to do that. But unfortunately, the, despite what conservatives say, there really isn't very much trickle down in terms of like that just means people at the top are going to get richer, I
Yeah.
guess so. and
Mhm.
and we'll still have minimum wage workers who are, you know either out of work or doing the same crap, some equivalent of the same crappy work they're doing now.
Now, a complicated question and kind of controversial. What do you think? And there's been talk about that, the universal basic income, the idea of
Yeah.
that, especially because technology is going to take over a lot of the jobs. So to guarantee people to have that, what's your stance on that? I'm not fully decided myself, but what
Yeah,
do
I
you think?
know. I know that the concern always is that people will just do nothing.
Yeah.
Like they'll just cash in
Mhm.
and they'll watch TV and just like and maybe lose. I think Elon Musk said something about that they would lose purpose. They would lose a
Mhm.
sense of meaning or
Mhm.
purpose because
Mhm.
they derive meaning and purpose from the fact that they are earning their living,
And
that
we
they get up
identify
every
with our
day,
work. Yeah, we
right?
identify sometimes with what we do, our occupation, because it's the question is, what do you do? And I am a teacher, I am a podcaster, I am this. So if you take that away, yes, it takes away the purpose for that for many people. You're right.
But I think the flaw there is that, underlying that, would be the meaning must also rest on a survival basis.
Mhm.
So it's kind of
Mhm.
like, what do you do? I'm a teacher. I take great pride in helping my students. Okay, so here's $1 million. Are you still a teacher? And you're like, hell no,
Yeah,
screw the students. I don't care about them. So,
yeah.
it's sort of, I feel like underlying it is the honest answer would be, I would rather, you know, I would rather be doing, skiing or traveling the world. But since I have to work, I have kind of gone heart and soul into teaching with the understanding that I would not be doing this if I didn't have to. So, the meaning and purpose part is coming partly from that survival instinct.
And we see that with people who win the lottery, and some people just say, screw this, I'm not doing this anymore, my work, but others still continue. And even though it's kind of low skilled labor, they say, no, I like going to the store, I like being a cashier, and they continue even though they have a lot of money in the bank account. I think that's important. I think it should come with certain like ideas of like maybe you have to be engaged in education, you have to take courses, you have to build skills, and then you get your income. So some sort of conditions,
Mm.
I think,
Well,
attached to it.
I don't know if I would put any conditions on it, but I think I would, um, you know, make it, have some public education around this idea of meaning and purpose. It's kind of like because I think what will happen is that there are a lot of people who will initially, well, actually, I'm not going to be that cynical. I'm going to say that for, I don't know if it's the majority of people, but many would view this as awesome. Now I can pursue that thing I really wanted to pursue.
Yeah.
And they're not going to say, well, that's great because I just want to do like zero with my life. I just want, I just want like minimum stress. I want to sleep in and watch TV all day. I don't think that, sure,
Yeah.
there's going to be a ton of people do that, but I
Yeah.
don't even think that's the majority.
Yeah, I think there'll be more podcasters too. There'll be people
Oh,
like doing this kind of
definitely.
stuff. And it's like,
And,
yeah, I'm getting paid.
and then the other thing is people might go through that phase, where they might be like, yay, TV every day or whatever. I'm just going to, but that's going to get old in a couple of weeks or a couple of months, and then they're going to say, then there might be a kind of almost a crisis, that's felt throughout the world, or in this sort of fantasy situation where we actually have it, where people are like, oh, wait a minute, and it becomes a kind of a cultural movement, like where people become aware. It's like, oh, actually, doing nothing is not a recipe for happiness. And then people will, it just becomes part of our culture that it's like, well, now that you are no longer working for survival, what will be your path of meaning and purpose? And there'll be all sorts of resources to help you identify that. And that's actually funny because I'm currently taking a course to be a meaning and purpose practitioner. And so it's sort of, and it sort of talks about, how to draw that out of people to kind of help them identify that. And so it's already something that people are interested in, I think, especially as people get older, they retire, during COVID, the grand resignation, people sort of
Yes.
beginning to say like, wait a minute, if we're going to have to struggle with this kind of, bizarre situation, this is really making me take stock of how I live my life and what my life's all about. And so, again, it would just be like, well, how about we just take away, you got a roof over your head, you got your basic requirements. Yeah. Now go forth and truly find meaning. And then you got, and what'll be awesome is that, for example, we keep talking about teaching because that's our background. And it's like, imagine if all of the deadbeat teachers who are just doing it for a paycheck stopped, like they just went home.
Yeah.
And all you had were the ones who were truly passionate about it.
Yeah.
That would be pretty great, like people who just really engage on it. How about, I love teaching, but I did not enjoy the workload, like I didn't. So it was, but in order to survive, you had to take on a full teaching schedule. And I always used to think, having like one class would be like really nice, like even in retirement or whatever. It's like, you can obsess and you can make the perfect lesson plan. You have your like 20 students that you meet with like once a week, and then you still have time for a life. But those students would get such quality education, because you would have the energy and the focus to give them everything they needed, as opposed to, oh, I'm balancing this crazy schedule. I'm working at 3 different schools, and I'm just trying to remember which assignment goes with what class, and I got to write some comment, and it's 4 a.m. in the morning, and I'm doing my marketing. So all of that could be removed, and you could just have this really quality education by people who are really passionate about it.
And I think we've hit the pause button for many people too, where it's like we were always in the go 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 mode, and so work more the better, and so on. And now I think we're realizing, no, it's like, take your time, take it slowly and enjoy it, and be better at it than just filling in ticking boxes of filling in the numbers and just working more hours. I think that is important. And this the idea of cutting down the work week to a 4-day work week. I think that's awesome. I think that's the right direction. And so once we do that, and the idea is we will actually, and they've shown the studies and findings that people become more productive because they're happier, they enjoy it more, and it's also better. It's a win-win situation for everyone.
Yeah, no, and I think there is some sweet spot there that we haven't quite reached. And it's like, I know, as you know, I take all of my vacation time that I usually would have gone, like a 2-week vacation somewhere, and now I just take like all the Mondays off for half the year, and it's such a different vibe, you know, like I'm so much so much happier, more productive, more engaged because it's always like, and it's another 3-day weekend coming up. I'm totally fine with whatever happens, you know, during those 4 days. Yeah, I think I'm generally the quality of my work, I think it does improve, you know,
Yeah.
and we do need, I mean, I was actually talking to somebody about this who was like a, um, well, she's she does osteopathy and she has a very busy practice, but she's got the 4-day thing down. And she
Mm,
was saying the 2 days with the 5 days just is not workable. She
mhm,
sees the stress. That's why people come to
mhm,
her. The 2 days is usually just spent catching up on all of the home stuff that you need to do to keep your life going, and then you know a little and family or whatever. You don't actually have a chance to rest. So there sort of does need to be that third day that's just rest, and that's something that AI could probably help us with.
exactly. I was thinking exactly that. They can do
Bring
the
it back.
laundry. I know, I was waiting for it to come back. Yes, they can do the laundry, they can do the folding, they can do the cleaning, stuff that, I don't myself enjoy, and then cooking could be optional. It's like, "Okay, AI, take the day off. I'm gonna cook today myself," or, "We're
Yeah.
gonna cook the
And,
humans." So, I think that would be awesome.
yeah, and you know, on that topic, I remember some of the early things I heard about AI that I thought were so great, which is there would be sensors in all of your household goods that would, like, for example, you have your laundry detergent, and then you know you got your big bottle of it, and then when it reaches like, you know, 90% empty, it trips on a sensor that immediately adds it to a digital shopping list. And so and then you know things like your milk or whatever it is, like everything knows where you're at. So then, you know, at the end of the week or the end of whatever, all you got your shopping list that has been created by your Alexa or whatever, and then you're just pushing a button, or not even, because it's all scheduled, and then it just arrives, and you know whatever. So it's just like so many little things
I
like, wow.
see that with payments now. It's automatic, and so you can program it. So even the monthly rent, it was something I'd worry about. It's like, oh my god, I have to give them the check
Yeah,
and so on. And you take away those stressors, and you just feel so much calmer. It's like I have less things on my plate, less to worry about. And I think that's the whole idea of technology, to make our life easier. And it can be done. And I'm hoping that taxes will be eliminated too, so we don't have to do it ourselves. We have program. The government does it for us, and that there's
yeah,
kind of a movement in that direction. But even if I compare that and compare it, like, I don't know, 20 years ago or so, when we did taxes on, like, handwritten taxes, and you try to add it up and the numbers don't match up, and it was like it would take days for me to do that.
yeah,
And
yeah,
now it's probably an hour and a half. It can be made simpler too. So I think that is something that a stressor that would take that would take away, they would take it away from me, and I would enjoy my time much more, instead of worrying every year. It's like, oh my god, now I have to do this.
yeah. Well, you know what I'm glad is that we actually started, you know, this hour in a very dark place, talking about the singularity and how they're going to take over in a kind of matrix situation where we're all just going to be like little batteries lying in a fetal position while our, you know, living in this sort of machine run world. But actually, you know, I think we've come across a lot of real positives, and again that sort of addresses that feeling that I certainly had, which I mentioned at the beginning, of like, on one hand it seems really fantastic, on the other, but there's this sort of sinister cloud hanging over it, and it's so easy to kind of go from one to the other. So in our day-to-day lives, great, and then sort of big picture, is this going to be the matrix? I guess we'll
Well, we
see.
can't stop it, so we better go with the flow and try our best. But I think the other side is super intelligence could help us solve problems that we can't solve ourselves, whether it's like famine or climate change or, again, overpopulation and so on. Just give it to AI. They will come up with a good solution. Peace as well.
I'm I'm
AI
I'm
decides for us.
I'm frightened to imagine what solution they would offer for overpopulation.
Well, we'll try to add in the empathy, compassion, but also a sense of humor, and see what what
Yeah.
comes up. Thank you so much for an awesome discussion.
And
Thank
thank
you,
you,
Chris.
Arash.
we're
That's right.
both thanking each other. And
Yeah.
this is the Chris Arash Show, and this was on artificial intelligence and other stuff, but all fascinating stuff. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks,
Take
everyone.
care. Bye, everyone.
Bye.